evening. Welcome to the Pearl Report. I'm Diana Lynn. For this year's Shaw Prize in Astronomy, Professors Stephen Balbus and John Hawley discovered that magnetic material in accretion disks in space is unstable and causes turbulence, which transports angular momentum outward. They call this phenomenon magnetorotational instability, which has spawned many other studies. First, we meet Stephen Balbus here at Oxford University. Stephen Balbus's interest in astronomy began as a child in Philadelphia, looking at the sky with his father, a physician.
I can't ever remember a time in my life when I wasn't interested in astronomy at some level. To have a subject where I can answer some important questions while going through the intellectual exercise of working with mathematical problems was very appealing to me.
Mathematics and physics was Stephen's double major at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He switched to astrophysics for his PhD at the University of California in Berkeley.
My real research goal is to explain astrophysical phenomenon, to understand processes that seem mysterious. I like to think about problems that have been around for a long time.
Last year, Balbus came to Oxford University as the Savilian Professor of Astronomy, a title once held by a prominent architect.
I can't help but feel a little bit of pride that I can trace the position I have back to Sir Christopher Wren himself.
Back in 1990, as a professor at the University of Virginia, Balbus and colleague John Hawley began a study of accretion disks that won them the Shaw Prize. They're spinning disks of gas forming around black holes, star formations,
quasars, and active galactic nuclei. So there's a huge range of astrophysical phenomenon in which understanding the accretion process was important. John and I were interested in the case of a black hole. How does the material in an accretion disk actually stop orbiting around the central object and fall in or spiral into the center so that the mass can build up? I was astonished at what I found. When there's a magnetic field present, as there almost invariably is, even a weak magnetic field with two nearby gas elements in an accretion disk, the magnetic effect would be as though they were connected with a weak spring. The spring pulls back on the inner mass, forward on the outer mass. The outer mass, with its new angular momentum, spins out, whereas the inner mass, which has lost angular momentum, spirals in, which destabilized the orbit very powerfully. This turned out to be the instability, what's now called the magnetorotational instability. The MRI can be derived basically with three equations.
Balbus's maths was solved by John Hawley's special numerical program.
That was really a little golden moment for us. The most difficult part of the problem was to realize that it was worth studying this problem with a magnetic field which appeared to be so weak that it was almost negligible.
This was a bit of a paradigm shift in accretion disk when people realized that there was a fairly straightforward way in which the plasma in accretion disks can go turbulent. And when it was realized how incredibly important magnetic field was in astrophysics.
It was a major discovery. It enabled us to get to grips with the key underlying physics of one of the two major energy sources that shaped the universe.
It was a paper that launched 1,000 papers.
Published in 1991, Balbus and Hawley's paper was studied by many scientists, including Stephen's then future wife, who now works down the hall at Oxford, Caroline Turquem.
I work on dynamics of extrasolar planets, and I teach as well.
The couple first met in 1996 at a conference in Israel.
I was very surprised because somehow this paper was so influential already. And then I met him and he was just like a normal person. Handsome, normal person.
I thought, oh, this is flattering. Have a pretty young researcher come up and talk to me like this. There is an analog of the magnetorotational instability, which people now call the magnetothermal instability. So the fallout from the MRI and the sort of modes of thought that it introduced, I'm crucially important for understanding outstanding problems, really profound and far-reaching.
He's very exciting to work with. He'll generate a lot of new ideas.
He's very amusing, has a great sense of humor. He's someone who you can rely on to have these sort of instincts of basic decency.
He's fun, socially and so on, yes. Extremely well read and always interesting on any topic.
Okay, then I'm going to move my point.
Astronomy doesn't help me understand anything more about the meaning of life or why we're here, but astronomy hugely enriches my life. And I would be totally astonished if we had intelligent life forms anywhere near us in the galaxy. The Earth is a very special place.
It's a really busy airport.
And none more special than home with the wife and kids.
I don't think there's a time I ever really wanted to be a physicist myself. It seemed kind of like no fun that my dad would always come home and have a lot of homework.
What are you scared of, space, Dad? Stars, galaxies, planets, the sun, which is a star.
That's true.
So Stephen Balbus is my dad. You're going to be one of the famous men in the world. I'm telling you that.
He won a prize?
Yes, with loads of gold and a medal. You mean money, not gold. My dad likes planets, Mom as well.
We do talk a lot about work. We argue as well about work.
Sometimes my parents argue a lot.
This is just a seafood pasta, plenty of garlic, a little oregano and rosemary.
Stephen cooks for the family nightly.
It does relax me. I do love food. I love all kinds of food.
I work in restaurants, I'm a cook. I think it was because you never let me at home. My father's a very good home cook.
Put your hat on. I cook for the children. I do clean the house.
The family now calls Oxford home.
I'm very happy here. Carolyn, she's happy. And the children also love Oxford. We're very pleased to be here.
Stephen Balbus and John Hawley began collaborating on accretion disks in 1990 at the University of Virginia. Chris Lincoln takes up the story.
I didn't set out expecting necessarily to solve the accretion disk problem. I just knew I wanted to work on it. And I knew I was having fun doing it. You've got a set of equations, and the argument is that these equations govern what's happening in the system. But you have to actually solve the equations, but they're too complicated to solve, just with pencil and paper. And so you then solve them in the computer, but then what do you do with the zeros and ones that are floating around inside the computer? You've got to bring them back into a form that allows the human to understand the system.
Printers were used in the early simulations.
You run it on the computer, and then you get the data out, and then you have to analyze the data. In the early days, that would be with line plots or contour plots, but we were sort of also pioneering with color images.
The simulation for the magnetorotational instability was an eye-opener.
When I ran it at relatively high resolution and with the right wavelength, then the image popped up on the screen like mushroom caps that are characteristic of instabilities. And that was another sort of wow moment. The instability was sort of made real at that point.
Fast forward to the early 2000s in a simulation of black hole accretion that John refers to as the bicycle tire.
It's a very nice, stable initial condition, and then once you put the magnetic field in, of course, it's unstable. The densest gas is red at the center of the ring. You see here at the beginning a sort of striations. What's happening is that the magnetic field is beginning to be stretched out. Now you're beginning to see the striations forming in the outer part of the disk. If we go forward, we see the whole disk eventually becomes turbulent, as it's all unstable now. And we begin to see the inner edge of the disk moving inwards towards the black hole.
John created different simulations with the bicycle tire so he could see matter spiraling into the black hole from more than one viewpoint.
You want to look at it from as many different angles as you can to really get a sense of what's going on.
John got a bidirectional jet shooting out of a black hole in this simulation, and it wasn't quite planned.
You haven't set it up, but it sort of develops naturally. The black hole is spinning, and the spinning black hole actually acts sort of like an egg beater to the magnetic field and causes it to rotate, and that drives positive energy out along this axis.
Increased computing power allows for a full 3D simulation like this one.
This is probably more sophisticated than I was hoping for when I started. Here it moves right over the axis, looking right down the beam, as it were. And then we're sort of constantly moving closer and closer towards the black hole, and so you can sort of see the material swirling around the black hole as it's accreted, and there you see some of the odd optics associated with relativity bending light waves close to the black hole.
Why is it important to know what's happening in an accretion disk?
Yes, well, I guess in some sense it's no more important than trying to understand any astronomical system. So if you're willing to stipulate that it's worthwhile knowing how the universe works, then it turns out that black holes probably account for maybe 10% of all the light that's in the universe.
Nature built things through accretion disks. How it did it was not known.
What John and Steve did was to provide a potential mechanism, then show that it would really operate and be effective in these environments. If you don't have an actual mechanism, there's always a background fear that you've got things wrong.
10, 9.
I grew up right in the middle of the Gemini and the Apollo program.
This is really a rugged planet.
There's hardly anything more exciting than the space program at that time. I had models of all the rockets and would follow the missions. If you go back far enough, I would give credit to my older brother Steve, who was interested in astronomy from a very early age. He had a telescope when I was a wee lad, and I got the telescopes as sort of a hand-me-down. He went on actually to become a space shuttle astronaut and flew on 5 missions over a 30-year career with NASA.
Home is in a forested area of Charlottesville, Virginia. John lives here with his wife, Kathy Holcomb, who works with him at the university.
My job is primarily a support job. So I support scientific computing, computational science, and engineering.
They co-wrote a book on astronomy.
We're both interested in computational science, numerical simulations, large scale in general.
We like forests. I grew up in Kansas, she grew up in Oklahoma. There are not a lot of trees out there.
They're really putting on a show today. There's 2 males that seem to be vying for the attention of at least 1 or 2 females.
John is now an associate dean for the sciences at the University of Virginia. He's been on campus since the mid-1980s. For now, he and Kathy are happy to stay.
The ubiquity now of large-scale computing and the big data are paradigm shifters, and there's a lot of opportunity for new ways of thinking, new modes of discovery.
When we come back, we'll meet the Shaw Prize winner for mathematics, a man in the middle of big data.
Welcome back to the Pearl Report. For 30 years, statistician David Donoho studied how to extract information from a growing mass of digital data. His maths created ways to recognize vital signals from unwanted background noise, leading to breakthroughs in imaging such as MRI scanning.
We all use smartphones and cameras and so on that allow us to communicate information around the world. Many of us don't think about all the brainiac ideas that support that. And it may not be clear that it's more than just engineering. There's mathematical ideas behind that.
David Donoho is a professor of statistics at Stanford University. His career started about the same time the world went digital in the 1980s. That's led to an explosion of data.
During my lifetime, we've transitioned from an era of data scarcity to data glut.
David's mathematical ideas have shown ways to get the most information out of data and to separate useful information from unwanted background noise. His work has been guided from the start by a phenomenon called sparsity. Sparsity is common, spikes of activity in a digital signal surrounded by relative quiet. David saw it first when he worked for an oil company in the 80s that used acoustic sensors to look for oil.
I've tried to find the mathematics to explain some of the phenomena.
Sparsity is here in the image of the night sky. If you broke this down into pixels, the information would be in the comparatively few stars. The blackness represents zero entries of little interest.
You imagine a sea of zeros with some non-zeros carrying the real information, so to speak. So that would be the simplest way to define a sparse sequence.
A sparse signal is easy to compress because the amount of meaningful data is small.
You can eliminate the storage of all the zero entries.
That's part of why we can move so much information around, like photos, so quickly in the digital world. The image you sent to a friend is compressed into a sparse version by a mathematical transform. When it reaches the other end, the transform is reversed and the image is decompressed. Here's what a photo looks like in a transformed state. David has written papers with Ian Johnstone showing the math to denoise a signal and bring out sparsity.
The fact that a signal is sparse means that it is in some sense simple and noise is complicated, and you can get rid of complicated noise and retain the simple signal.
You can program software to remove noise or unwanted data in a process called thresholding.
The noise is a kind of background, like grass. And then there are these daisies that poke up. Those are the sparse instances that you're looking for. And if you just mow down the grass, all that's left is the daisies.
Anything below the threshold and deemed to be noise is removed. David is cited often for his academic work on compressed sensing, which can be used to speed up data acquisition, for instance in magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. Here's a fully sampled image. Then the same image with a limited amount of data, it's 6 times undersampled. And then still 6 times undersampled, but after compressed sensing. Michael Lustig has written papers on the topic with David and worked on a compressed sensing project with the Stanford Children's Hospital.
It's very hard to image kids, especially when you try to image their body. They move.
The imaging time, though, could be cut from 8 minutes to 70 seconds.
And they were able to get the same quality of images.
To undersample an image and get a reliable reconstruction requires a special algorithm to determine what the original image was. It's based on geometry in high dimensions.
If we had a lower dimension space here and projected this object, see where that goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here, etc. This goes here. Then if we formed the convex body that these fill out, there's one point here that gets lost under the projection. This one was a boundary point in high dimensions, but it became an interior point in low dimensions. This is lost under projection. That's the thing we want to avoid. This point we'll call it preserved. It started out on the boundary of the set, and it ended up on the boundary. We want to find a way to have a high-dimensional object and project it so nothing gets lost. And if we can do that, then it's possible to have high-dimensional objects correctly recovered from low-dimensional data. We might find a different projection, say over here, in which this maps here, this maps here, this maps here, this maps here, this maps here. They all are preserved. So this one is good. We like it.
MRI makers have not yet built compressed sensing into their products. The math to describe how it works lagged behind the initial engineering ideas. Now it provides a confirmation, and interest is growing.
We have an annual meeting of the Society of Magnetic Resonance in Medicine. And in 2005, there was one abstract that was submitted on compressed sensing, and now there's 3 or 4 sessions that are just directed towards compressed sensing.
David lives with his wife Mickey in an historic Stanford house.
The first house on the Stanford campus that was developed for faculty is this one. The professor of art history who designed the house, Arthur Clarke, also did things like the wood carvings.
When they bought this house about 10 years ago, it was run down.
This place had 40 years of deferred maintenance, and it didn't look indeed anything like the place that you're sitting now. Had no foundation, was all crumbled.
Is that kale? Yeah. Kale became the most popular thing in the world.
Mickey, too, is a statistician.
I analyze financial economics data.
David and Mickey met when they were both graduate students at Harvard in the early 1980s.
After, I don't know how many months, we sat one afternoon outside my office and started talking and talking and talking, and late into the night and the next day.
They have a son, Daniel, in Los Angeles.
He recently received his MD. He's pursuing neurosurgery.
And for the last 7 years, David and Mickey have been getting to know each other in new ways. They've become serious ballroom dancers.
It brought us together in other ways that we were not before. It's mental, it's physical, it's a little bit theatrical.
The first thing in dancing, the first rule is you have to smile, and then people will enjoy watching you. There was a long struggle to get me to smile, because apparently my face had been locked in a frown for 30 years.
Well, thank you for watching our show. It will be re-aired on Tuesday and Saturday, as well as on tvb.com. Next week, the 10th anniversary of the Shaw Prize. Until then, from the Pearl Report team, good night, good luck, and good health.